Now to the economy. Doug Holtz-Eakin was the former director of the Congressional Budget Office and is now the president of the American Action Forum. And as such, he spent the last few decades giving very solid advice on how the government can actually make ends meet. Well, how we can slow down inflation and maybe even get the economy back on track. We're honored to have him back on Center Point again. So it's good to have you, Doug.
Thanks, Rob. Nice to be here.
Well, so let us know how you think Congress and the president could fix the mess that we're in right now and maybe even get things back to where they were a long time ago.
Well, I think for Congress and the president, they should put aside the inflation problem, put aside anything that's going to happen in the next year or two, and focus on the fundamentals. Those fundamentals are the fact that the federal budget is on an unsustainable trajectory. It is steadily adding debt faster than the economy is growing. It is steadily adding interest payments. Will soon be bigger than the Pentagon budget. They need to get that under control and put things in a position so that we're not facing the threat of enormous interest rate spikes or enormous tax increases, given an environment in which companies can flourish, business can grow. That's the most important thing. Long-run growth, faster increases in the standard of living. That's their main job. And the administration has been running up a regulatory tab that's enormous, $360 billion of costs imposed on American businesses since they took office. That's a huge burden on growth, and that pace has to slow and reverse as well. So these are not complicated ideas. These are just the hard work that people have avoided for quite some time, and now we have no choice. It is time to get it done.
Plenty of Americans dread or hate April 15th, tax day. It's coming up. But it's a quick reminder here, less than half of Americans pay taxes at all. So the Biden administration is looking at raising taxes on those making the most. Do you think that's the best way to get out of this deficit?
No. You should begin as you mean to go on, and there is no way to tax ourselves out of this problem. However appealing it might be to just keep throwing taxes at the ultra-rich, there's not enough of them and not enough money to make that work. So we're going to have to be realistic about the amount of spending that the federal government can do. And that means actually taking on the big programs, the Social Securities, the Medicares, the Medicaids, Affordable Care Acts of the world, not because politicians somehow want to take things away from Americans. That's not the problem. The problem is that they don't do anything. Those programs fail on their own. Social Security runs out of money in 10 years. Medicare does in 5. It is not a service to the beneficiaries to leave those programs untouched, as the president has asked Congress to. It is a service to put them on a financially sustainable trajectory and in the process clean up the red ink for the rest of the budget. That's the number one task.
A story that didn't get a lot of attention last week, China and Brazil announced that they're going to ditch the dollar and use their own currencies to trade. Not the first time something like that has happened, but what are the consequences for the U.S., short-term and long-term?
The consequences are that, China at every opportunity in a very disciplined way tries to usurp the U.S. role in the global financial system. That is, the dollar is the reserve currency. It is the currency in which most transactions are conducted. And that gives us a big advantage in borrowing because people want to have U.S. treasuries for those transactions. It lowers the borrowing costs of the United States. If we don't take care of business, people will get away from the dollar because it's not a reliable currency. The Chinese will be happy to step in and replace it, and China will have those advantages. We will not. And so both in the near term and the long term, all roads lead to getting our fiscal house in order, helps us internally, helps us with the rest of the world.
So word is the Fed might raise interest rates one more time. Ideally, where do you think interest rates should be?
I think the Fed is behind the curve still, to be honest. Most indicators would put the correct federal funds rate somewhere in the mid-5s, maybe 6 at this point. They're not there yet. So, these are all estimates. It could be they're right. There's one more raise necessary. It'll be fine. But I at least had a far less optimistic reading of last Friday's inflation report. That was greeted with open arms by Wall Street traders and the easy money crowd. But it showed services inflation going up, not down. Services is the biggest inflation problem we have right now. I don't think the Federal Reserve is going to look at that and think, oh, we're good. I think they're going to look at that and say, hey, we have more work to do. And they will not hesitate to continue raising rates. And that may surprise some, but that's the necessary step to get us back to an environment where businesses are not worried about inflation every day. And families aren't worried about inflation every day. I think we're far from having won this battle.
Doug, we appreciate you coming on Centerpoint.
My pleasure. Thank you.